Okay, I just wanted to show you what my first attempt. This is actually the third molar because I thought it would be a little easier, and kind of some of the strategies I picked up while just messing around with this over the past week. Um, First thing that I found is kind of helpful is when surface is checked and you draw off the item, it just draws a straight line where it exits from the surface. So this is kind of how I surveyed the height of contour, whereas before I just kind of guesstimated where I thought it should be. Now I just kind of do this all over the surface, however much you need to. Uh, that. And what this does is gives you a nice survey line. And like you said, this is really annoying if you just uncheck that. So then I came through and just kind of connected the dots. I wasn't terribly accurate when I did this, even on my real try. Now that establishes the height of contour, at least from the survey of straight from above. This, whether this is truly in line with the long axis of the tooth, I'm not sure. But anyway, so that is that. The next thing I did is exactly what you did. Try to draw in you know, the, the basic anatomy and then approximate that with quadrilaterals. So, let's see. You had something to this effect. Obviously, the distal lingual groove, these cuff tips, like that. And after a while of doing that, this is what I came up with. And there's definitely some compromises here. Trying to avoid triangles as much as possible, and all around the outside, that's actually very easy. It's nice because we can approximate these as Gothic pyramids, essentially with four quads meeting up. But these maxillary molars kind of throw a curveball, especially with this transverse ridge and this kind of flat incline of this big mesiolingual cusp. So I had to get kind of creative on how to, if anytime you have an area this big that's converging into an area this big, your mesh spacing might be big out here, but it's going to get really dense in here in order to keep the topology good. So there's places where I had to use poles to split lanes of the grid to keep the density of the mesh more or less the same. Here's a triangle. I'll show you how I dealt with that. Same up here. So I did this, and then I kind of tried to visualize the flows, and I tried a couple different things, and this is what I ended up with. I tried to plan how many grid marks I wanted along this occlusal surface, because I know that we want a loop around the height of contour, we want a loop around the occlusal surface, but then it's kind of, what goes on internally is kind of up in the air. I was just going to kind of see what happens. So I wanted 3 face loops from here to here, and here I have 1, 2 up here, which seems like not enough, but it's not a very detailed surface right here, so I think we can get away with that. But that causes these to get very tight in here, just like I was talking about. So I'll show you what that ended up doing, and then this is relatively easy and clean. And then kind of the question of what to do here. So I ended up letting the cross ones bend around a pole here to terminate there, and then that created that. So that's kind of how I ended up doing the topology, and you can see the result here. So, and the loops that came out of this, if you hold down Alt and right click when you're in face mode here, you can select, it'll select the loop for you. So the obvious one is occlusal surface, height of contour. You can see the contact disrupts that a little bit, but it's still intact. And then from the height of contour to the CEJ, I've left nice and open like that because we're going to assume that most of the time when we're designing restoration for a crown, the finish line is going to be between the height of contour and the CEJ. So that'll allow someone very easily to just cut through this. That's going to maintain all quads if they can cut straight through this region, and then trim off this bottom part and let that seat. And so we have the potential to have even the final restoration be all quads and highly sculptable. So let me undo that. That's wireframe. Let's see here. Control Z. Control Z. There we go. So back to the different face loops. You can see this actually created a circular kind of crossing flow. So if we check this one, and once it intersects on itself, it doesn't keep going. But if I come here and select this, we get different kind of funky flows. But I think I'm actually okay with the way this kind of naturally breaks up the tooth. I mean, we have a groove. If I can get it to, we have this face loop coming right through the center of the tooth, and like that's okay. We have kind of defining the occlusal surface, and that's odd, but let's say it ended here. Not too bad. Again, the big triangular fossa up here. The occlusal outline. The contacts. So and now we see that the density of the mesh kind of corresponds to the density of detail. Like we may end up later wanting to sculpt, and once we take this to a higher resolution mesh by subdividing it, sculpt and detail here, and kind of the density of the mesh here is going to allow us to get a lot of detail here where it's important, without too much energy expenditure information-wise out here on these kind of nice regular surfaces. The only place I'm not really pleased with is right in here. If I hide all this, you can see that I used diamonds here to take. So here we have 1, 2, 3 faces, and as we go from here to here, 3 and 1, 2, 3, 4. So these diamonds split off to a bunch. You can see there's an E pole right there. There's an N pole. Where's the other one? N pole and E pole. And so this little collection of poles here resulted in that kind of funky edge loop swinging through here. But it also resulted in an ability to keep the mesh density from cramming in here. If we had 5 faces in this space, it'd really be getting too dense. So that's that. So keep an eye on this little tactic here. I used it again up here where we have this central groove, and then it kind of splits. Come on, give it to me. Well, you can see it. There we go. It comes in through here because I used a diamond here and here to split these 3 into this kind of fan-shaped Y. So, okay. I guess the way to kind of guide which face loop gets selected is to click closest to the perpendicular edge. If I click here, it'll go that way. If I click here, it'll go that way. So there, that's I think that turned out pretty well. If I tab it back into object mode, hide the original one, and this is what it looks like with just those vertices. Pretty good for only 400, 500 vertices. Just some smoothing. If I add a multi-resolution modifier. Subdivides pretty well, and you can see the anatomy is preserved even under subdivision. I mean, granted, it's smoothed out a lot because we haven't sculpted it or done anything, but now we have a really high-res mesh that's all quads, and that's will sculpt pretty easily because if we switch the shading to flat, we can see that the quads are kind of aligned with the direction of the anatomy. So that's going to make sculpting a whole lot easier. All right, so I think that went